This video is going to go out to Bionic Dance, and that's because this Bionic Dance has gotten involved in a conversation that probably should have never happened in the first place. And that's because some ignorant atheist made a bunch of statements that really he just didn't, he was totally clueless on. Okay? So, this involved a conversation between an ignorant atheist and Jesus Freak 777. And what the ignorant atheist was trying to say was that we Christians are prone to paranoid delusions which justify us sacrificing our children in human sacrifices. That's a load of garbage. It really is. And that's because this ignorant atheist missed three things. Three. These three details flip the whole conversation on its heels. We're talking about it taking a complete 180. So let's go through the three facts that take this whole conversation on 180 and make this guy look like a complete idiot. Number one, we can't recognize God? Please. The only one that doesn't recognize God is him. And I can't believe that. But it's true. Okay. Some examples of this. Moses shows up with the Israelites at Mount Sinai. The Shekinah glory of God comes down. Thousands of people suddenly recognize that God is there. When you see that kind of Shekinah glory, you know it's God who showed up. No question. Take, for instance, the book of Numbers. Go to chapter 22. Start with verse 22 and go through verse 35. And you find a little story in which a donkey ended up being smarter than Balaam. The donkey recognized that there was an angel of the Lord in front of him, and also recognized that God was there too. That made Balaam look like an idiot. But let's fast forward to the New Testament. Saul of Tarsus, was going to, he was on the Damascus Road. He was going to kill a bunch of Christians. Jesus shows up. Him and his entire band recognized that God was there. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. So you see, we know when God shows up. We know the difference between a daydream and a delusion and some sort of hallucination that's caused by some kind of drug. And we know when God shows up. So there's fact number one. So when we're dealing with God, we know who we're dealing with. Number two, God brings people back from the dead. Want proof of this? Jesus brought Lazarus back from the dead. God brought Jesus back from the dead. It is a hope that has been lived by Israelites from the time of Abraham all the way to the time of Jesus, and by Christians from the time of Jesus all the way to now. In the book of Revelations, it clearly states, number one, Revelation states two things. Number one, it states that people will immediately be able to recognize Jesus when he comes back. That's right. Even the most powerful atheist is going to know that Jesus has shown up as soon as he does. They're going to recognize Jesus. God promises that. Number two, the hope of all Christians is in the book of Revelations, where it says that God will bring us back from the dead and put us back in perfect health. Wow! That's just two facts. Fact number three. God does not allow human beings to go through with human sacrifices, even if God himself asks you to do it. How do we know this? Because let's look at the story of Abraham. Abraham prepares Isaac for the sacrifice, but just before he can drop that dagger into Isaac, God stops him. This is God's perfect answer to human sacrifice. He says, even when I command it, you can't do it. Even when I tell you to commit a human sacrifice, you can't do it. Because I'm going to tell you also to stop. God gives the ultimate answer to human sacrifice by saying, Abraham, don't follow through. I know I told you to do it, but don't follow through. Because I cherish life. Now keep in mind, Abraham knew two things. Number one, he knew that even if he did sacrifice Isaac, that God could bring Isaac back to life. Number two, he knew that probably God was going to stop him before he got the job done. So like I said, getting a command like that from God was not such a big deal to Abraham. As he figured either God was going to stop him from the sacrifice or God was going to bring Isaac back to life. In either case, it wasn't going to be that bad of a situation. That's how much Abraham trusted God. So this is really a matter of trust. Do you trust God so much that you'll carry out the sacrifice knowing that, number one, God will either stop you from sacrificing your child, or number two, He'll bring your child back to life even if you do it? It's called trust. The whole story was about trusting God implicitly. Abraham trusted God implicitly, and God rewarded him for that. So, the real issue is, one, do we recognize that it's God and not some paranoid delusion or daydream? Two, do we really believe that God can bring people back from the dead? Three, do we also believe that God will most likely stop us from committing that sacrifice even if we try to do it? There's your answers. You see? Look. God holds the keys of life and death. Let's look at it this way. In the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel talks to God. God comes down to him and says, look, I want you to tell your wife goodbye because she's getting ready to die. That was hard for Ezekiel to swallow, but he trusted God that God knew what he was doing. And so Ezekiel went to his wife, told her goodbye, and it wasn't long after that she was dead. You can read that story for yourself. But Ezekiel did not kill his wife. Likewise, even when God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, Abraham pretty much knew that most likely he was not going to be able to follow through because God was probably going to stop him at some point. He didn't know when it was going to be stopped, but he knew at some point he was going to be stopped. So, does God approve of human sacrifices? Absolutely not. And we have the ultimate story to tell us that. We also have the ultimate story of trust. Abraham trusted God that much. That's what this was all about. So that makes this atheist look about as stupid as it comes. Hopefully that cleared up everything. If you have any questions, leave them down here in the comments below. I will tell you more in a future video, so stay tuned.